The Quincy are the natural enemies of the Shinigami, and they are the main antagonists during the 1000-year Blood War arc of Bleach. They are led by the father of all Quincy, Yhwach, who wields a deadly arsenal of abilities, including the Almighty. While we know that Yhwach had created all of the Quincy, there has still been a lot of speculation about the history behind the source of their power. Do the Quincy actually owe everything that they have to Yhwach, or do Quincy powers originate from an even greater source which dates back to over 1,000,000 years ago? In this video, I'm going to be breaking down the true nature of Quincy powers, as well as how they link back to the Soul King. Hopefully by the end of this video, you'll know how the Soul King is intricately linked to the Quincy race. By combining all of the knowledge that we know from the Bleach manga, as well as all of the Bleach light novels, we'll finally get down to the mystery of the origins of the Quincy powers. So without further delay, here is my video explaining the true nature and source of all Quincy power. Discover the Undead Collection and be amongst the very first to join us on our journey over at getsuga.com. The 1000-year Blood War arc anime has introduced us to several exclusive scenes which expand upon the lore of the Bleach universe. Within episode 1 of Core 2, there is an image of a woman holding a baby which is supposed to represent Yhwach and his mother. Within chapter 537 of the Everything But the Rain flashback arc, Isshin tells Ichigo that Yhwach is the father of all of the Quincy. He goes on to explain that 9 years ago, in an attempt to recover his own power, Yhwach had stolen the powers of the mixed-blooded Quincy. This had affected Uryu's mother Kanai Katagiri, as well as Ichigo's mother Masaki Kurosaki. Thanks to these comments made by Isshin, it is clear that Yhwach is the progenitor of all of the Quincy. Now what about the connection between Yhwach and the Soul King? If Yhwach is the son of the Soul King, then does this mean that the Quincy powers had originated from the Soul King? There's been a lot of speculation amongst fans whether if we are supposed to interpret this link between Yhwach and the Soul King as an actual relationship, or if it's just a spiritual connection. Like how Yhwach refers to Ichigo as his son born in the dark, the word son being used in a figurative rather than in a literal sense. During the flashback of Bazby and Haschwalth's childhood, which takes place between chapters 631 to 634, Yhwach states that there hasn't been another Quincy born with the same powers as him for the last 200 years. This statement implies that there were Quincy's that were born before him. This contradicts Yhwach being the father or the progenitor of all of the Quincy, as this statement implies that there were other Quincy's born before him. So what is the actual origin of Quincy powers and abilities? At the start of the 1000-year Blood War arc, the Shinigami are overwhelmed by Yhwach's forces. After having lost their Bankai, the Gotei 13 begin searching for answers about the nature of the Quincy's abilities. The three main abilities that the Quincy possess. The first is the Quincy Complete or Holy Form. This transformation enhances the Quincy's fighting abilities as well as their appearance. Also, while they are in their holy form, their ability to manipulate spirit particles is greatly enhanced. In terms of physical appearance, they manifest two wings and they have a halo above their head, which is completely made up of spirit particles. Kilgate Oppi's holy form is the very first one that we see within chapter 490. The second most prominent Quincy ability is referred to as Bloot, and this encompasses the ability known as Bloot Vein and Bloot Artery. Bloot involves manipulating the flow of spirit particles through the user's own blood vessels in order to create significant boosts in both offensive and defensive power. A major flaw of Bloot is that both the offensive and defensive powers are achieved through two separate particle systems, and it's impossible to activate them both at the same time. In chapter 537, it is revealed that pure-blooded Quincy inherit Bloot from birth, whereas mixed-blooded Quincy need to train in order to use it. The third most prominent ability that Yhwach's Quincy possess is the power to steal Bankai from the Shinigami. They do this by absorbing the Bankai into the Quincy medallion that they carry. Quincy's also have several notable items like the Quincy Cross, the Sanrei Glove, Zelle Schneider, Hollow Bait, as well as the Quincy Bangle. When we look at the fundamentals of Quincy, they are defined as a subspecies of humans who have higher than average spiritual power as well as the innate ability to to freely manipulate spirit particles. This is how we perceive Uryu Ishida and Ryuken for most of the series. However, during the 1000-year Blood War arc, it is revealed that all Quincy under Yhwach have been given a Schrift. These are unique powers that manifest once Yhwach inscribes a letter onto the soul of a Quincy. By obtaining a Schrift, it augments a Quincy's natural ability, and when that Quincy dies, their power is eventually returned to Yhwach. In chapter 614, Yhwach mentions to Ichigo that having the eyes of the Almighty is evidence of being a true Quincy. This is the exact same powers that the Soul King has, so already there is a clear distinction between ordinary Quincy and those who possess the Almighty. The anime exclusive scenes in the 1000-year Blood War arc do show Ichigo with multiple irises within his eye, which indicate that he may also have the Almighty. We see this while Ichigo is training within the realm of Irazusando. While Yhwach is asleep, Haschwalth gains the abilities of the Almighty, and we also see him with multiple irises within his eye. As far as we know, none of the other Sternritter or the Soldat possess the eyes of the Almighty. By possessing the powers of the Almighty, Yhwach declares that he himself is the most true Quincy. In chapter 565, Kubo illustrates Yhwach as a baby who possessed the power to share his soul with others. Anyone who had touched Yhwach as a baby received a fragment of Yuha's soul, and at the moment of their deaths, the fragment had returned to Yhwach. In the same chapter, Haschwalth explains to Uryu that Yhwach is connected to all of the Quincy, further elaborating that if Yhwach does not continue to absorb the souls of others, then eventually he will return to the body that he once had when he was first born, a vessel that is unable to see, hear, move, or smell. We learned that in the past, when Quincy's were born with the ability to share powers with others, instead of taking power from their surroundings, these babies were typically killed by the families out of shame. Yuha was pretty much able to survive because the other Quincy's had considered him to be a miracle once he had started to share fragments of his soul with others, and he was able to heal them of their ailments. This entire backstory supports the idea that Yhwach is the originator of a separate group of Quincy who owe their power to Yuha. He is pretty much the originator of all Schrift abilities. It's gonna be a stretch for me to admit that Yuha is the originator of the traditional Quincy powers, which we see Uryu and his family use early on in the series. I think that these abilities were bestowed upon Quincy's from birth via the Soul King, and Yhwach was the anomaly who was able to augment these powers, and thus he had dubbed himself as the progenitor of all Quincy, as he deems him and his army to be the true Quincy, and the other faction who utilize traditional Quincy means to be the impure or untrue Quincy. We can learn more about Yhwach's relationship to the Soul King via a quote from Tokinada from volume 3 of Can't Be Your Own World. Tokinada states that if Yhwach is the ancestor of the group called the Quincy, then the Soul King itself is the source of the Quincy's powers. Tokinada is unsure whether if the Soul King had left behind a child before he was sealed away by the 5 great noble families, or that the powers of the Quincy were separated from the Soul King's body and they ended up manifesting into a human form like Yhwach. The Soul King is defined as the ancient ancestor of the Quincy's, as he has properties of all of the spiritual races within him. He is the original hybrid being who possesses Hollow, Quincy, Fullbringer, Shinigami, and human properties. We don't know if the Soul King had left behind a child, but Tokinada speculates that perhaps a portion of the Soul King's power had manifested into a human form, and that form could have been Yhwach. Since nothing here is confirmed and it's all speculation, I believe that we are not meant to take the word son literally in the context of Yhwach and the Soul King. Like I mentioned earlier, in chapter 514, Yhwach figuratively refers to Ichigo as his son born in the dark. In the way that Ichigo is the son of Yhwach because he possesses Quincy powers, I believe that Yhwach is referred to as the son of the Soul King simply because he possesses the powers of the Almighty. So while Schrift abilities originate from Yhwach, I believe that the traditional Quincy powers of manipulating spirit particles actually originates from the Soul King. We know that Kubo had taken a lot of heavy inspiration for the Quincy from Judeo-Christian concepts. There is an interesting parallel that I've discovered between Yhwach's character and to the Abrahamic religions. Within the Bible, God created the world similar to how the Soul King created the 3 realms. According to the biblical text, Jesus was born of a human woman via spiritual means. This may be what Kubo was trying to depict within the anime original scene at the start of Core 2, where we see a woman holding Yhwach as a baby. Could it be that the Messiah of the Quincy was born to a virgin mother? This may well be a plausible theory theory, especially when we consider how the fragments of the Soul King as well as the body parts of the Soul King are distributed via the cycle of reincarnation. So the fragment of the Soul King, which represents Quincy powers, may manifest every few hundreds of years or so, granting a Quincy woman to bear a child via spiritual means, and when that child is born, it is different to the others within its race. If the baby is accepted, then it is considered to be a miracle. So for the entirety of history, since the Soul King was sealed up over 1,000,000 years ago, there may have been multiple instances of virgin births, but all were rejected until Yhwach was born, and similar to Jesus, Yhwach had the power to heal the ailments of others. So in this sense, it would make sense to refer to Yhwach as the son of the Soul King, similar to how Jesus is referred to as the Son of God. So while the Soul King is sealed up within a crystalline structure, it's evident that within the cycle of reincarnation, the will of the Soul King is very present. Having said all of this, it brings up a very interesting discussion about the link between Yhwach and Haschwalth. There is a special link between the two of them that does not exist with other members of the Quincy race. When we get a deeper look into the formation of Yhwach's Empire of Light and the childhood of Bazbi and Haschwalth, we learn that Bazbi notices that Haschwalth had pretty much little to no ability with Quincy powers. No matter how much they trained together, Haschwalth could not gather spirit particles or even create a single bow. Bazbi recalls how he had heard about Quincy like this who were born every few decades. They were considered to be disabled and they were culled while they were very young. It is also revealed that a Quincy like Haschwalth hadn't been born in a few hundreds of years. When Yhwach selects Haschwalth as his right-hand man, he explains to the young Quincy that the reason why he cannot operate on the same level as the other Quincy's is because he has the ability to share his powers with others. This is why Bazbi had kept on getting stronger and stronger while he was in the company of Haschwalth when they were growing up. It's then revealed that Yhwach is someone who has lived for over 200 years, and Bazbi notes that Yhwach is said to be the progenitor of the Quincy race. In chapter 633, Yhwach even says that there hasn't been another Quincy born with the same powers as him for the last 200 years after he was born. Hopefully Kubo explains more details about this within Core 3 and 4, because right now all we can do is assume that the Soul King via the cycle of reincarnation allows for special Quincy's to be born every 200 years or so, and these special Quincy are characterized with the ability to share powers with others. So far we only know of Yhwach and Haschwalth who have such an ability. Looking at individuals like Progenitor and Gerard, it supports the idea that the Quincy had originated from the Soul King. I'm hoping that via the anime exclusive scenes that we have yet to see within Core 3 and 4, we learn more about the origins of the Quincy race. Progenitor is designated with the letter C as his Schrift, which stands for the compulsory. Progenitor is the left hand of the Soul King who governs progress. In terms of Gerard, he is being designated with the letter M as his Schrift, which stands for the miracle. In chapter 656, Askin explains that both Progenitor and Gerard were Quincy who were never granted powers by Yhwach, since they already had Schrift abilities of their own before Yhwach had a chance to grant them a Schrift letter. This is proof to some extent that the Quincy derive their powers from the Soul King and not solely from Yhwach. However, one interesting fact that I have to point out is the fact that Gerard had his powers taken from him via Yhwach's Ashvalin, which he had casted in chapter 680. I think that Yhwach was able to take away his powers because at this point in the story he had already absorbed the Soul King, and this had granted him immense power over all other beings, including individuals who possess body parts of the Soul King, because we don't really know how the Quincy had come into existence, and it's not confirmed whether if Yhwach is the figurative or literal son of the Soul King. But if all of these parallels to Abrahamic religion are true, then it may well mean that Yhwach is the literal son of the Soul King, with him being conceived via a spiritual method. Yhwach was born of a virgin mother, Yhwach had the ability to heal others, and lastly Yhwach was resurrected. These are massive parallels to Jesus, and I don't think that Kubo had done this by coincidence. I think that all of this was done purposefully. We have now reached the point of the video where I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. What do you guys think about the origins of the Quincy powers, as well as the relationship between Yhwach and the Soul King, and Yhwach and Haschwalth? What does it mean to be a special Quincy, and what is the true origin story of the Quincy race? I look forward to reading all of your thoughts on these very mysterious matters. Hopefully we can get a better idea of whether if Yhwach is the progenitor of all of the Quincy, or if the Quincy race had originated from the Soul King. So definitely continue the discussion in the comments, and lastly, thank you for making it to the end of this video, and I look look forward to seeing all of you in my next Bleach Explained video. A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.